So thank you very much for coming, and shall we start with Alexander Kahn's presentation?
Thank you, Andrei. I probably should start saying that I'm not really an academic, and my presentation will be probably outside the normal rules and regulations of an academic presentation, but I indeed have known Sergey Kuryokhin. Well, we met in 1978, long before he became famous, and we worked a lot together. We were both of the same age. We were both ardent enthusiasts of new arts, primarily new music. We started. We started together in 1979 in Leningrad, something which was called Contemporary Music Club. He was like the main artist of the institution. I was the president, and we were trying to kind of bring out to the audiences the new music, the avant-garde that we both were extremely fascinated with. Well, probably before I carry on, I should say a few words about what you are seeing here. This is one of the latest manifestations of Kuryokhin's genius. I'm never embarrassed to use the word. This is a popular mechanics performance in Helsinki in August 1995. The penultimate popular mechanics, the final one, is the famous 1418 in St. Petersburg a month later. So this is a precursor, and in my humble opinion, this is probably the most important of all popular mechanics. There's a lot to be said about what you are seeing, and we could analyze every single image, associations, but that will take much more time than not only my presentation allows, but the whole evening allows. But for you just to see that and to have an idea of the richness and diversity of the visuals, at least, not so much the music, but the visuals that he employed in his live performances. But again, as I said, this is the very, very late period in Sergey Kuryokhin's life. This is less than a year before he died, and this was the result of an extremely fast evolution of the artist that took place throughout the 1980s. But where did it all begin? It all began with the little boy studying piano at a music school in the Crimean city of Yevpatoria, where he lived with his father, who was a military, with his family. His father was a military officer, and in 1971, at the age of 17, the family moved to Leningrad. By then, Kuryokhin had graduated from the music school. It was a secondary music school, not a conservatory, no nothing. And he came to Leningrad at the age of 17, full of ideas, full of aspirations, an ardent rock music fan, which was inevitable for pretty much anyone of the generation who were growing up in the 1960s. And he enrolled into the Institute of Culture. Again, that was an educational institution, I would say, a notch lower than the conservatory, but he enrolled into 3 departments: piano, or choir conducting, and something else which I forget now. Well, never mind, because he never completed his education there. He was kicked out fairly soon for failing to attend classes and for complete, utter and radical non-conformism in his approach. He started playing in the various rock groups, while rock was still very much a forbidden term in the Soviet Union, and the euphemism for those was a vocal instrumental ensemble. So he played in one of those, he toured, he became pretty much a professional musician, but that was very boring. That's him, by the way. It was a very boring job, and any professional group had to comply with lots of rules that existed in the official professional Soviet state, which was completely hateful to pretty much any decent rock fan, and especially to somebody as radical as Kuryokhin. So he moved into the rock underground, but at the same time he was developing a taste for the avant-garde, for jazz, for free jazz and jazz avant-garde. He remembered that his first taste of jazz came from Voice of America, where he heard John Coltrane quartet, but he was inspired not even so much by Coltrane's fluid saxophone playing, but McCoy Tyner with his piano playing, just because he was, of course, mostly because he was a pianist. When I first saw him play in 1978, I was completely shocked by the dexterity of his piano playing. He was part of a free jazz quartet, and the energy, the thrust was absolutely, I mean, I had by the time been already quite a knowledgeable free jazz fan, but it was completely, absolutely out of ordinary. But there was nothing yet to suggest that it would turn into what has become a subject of our evening today. There was nothing of irony, there was nothing of scope, it was sort of plain, pure energy, magnificent piano technique, and he was a part of a jazz ensemble. The ensemble was led by saxophonist Anatoly Vapirov, who had indeed by then graduated from the conservatory, was a trained composer, and sort of gravitating towards very sort of third string, solid, mammoth compositions. And a first indication of Kuryokhin's further move towards laughter, irony, and skill was when at some point, we very soon became friends, and at some point he admitted to me, you know, sometimes during Vapirov's pompous, ponderous compositions, I have a feeling like I want to put a clown's red nose on my face to somehow lower this pathos, lower this pomposity. He hated it pretty much from the very start, and he was looking for ways to find, for roots, I would say, to find a way out of this seriousness of what his initial aspirations towards creative music. He somehow felt that they were bringing him to a dead end. Of course, he never gave up on rock, and in the very early 80s, he started collaborating with Aquarium. But then, at that time, Aquarium was still very little known rock group in Leningrad. By far not the most important, not the best known, but Aquarium and its leader, Boris Grebenshchikov, had pretty much the same mentality. And Aquarium's seminal album, on which Kuryokhin collaborated, Triangle, introduced this very postmodern, very subtle, ironic attitude that was hitherto absolutely non-existent and unknown in not only in Soviet rock music, but I would probably say in Soviet art in general. And we should, of course, remember or recall the general atmosphere that existed in the country and in the cultural life in the early 1980s. Brezhnev died in 1982, and his death and even his last years of his life and the 2 years that the 3 years between Brezhnev's death and the advent of perestroika, Mikhail Gorbachev's new policy, were the period of stagnation. Stagnation with the officialdom, with the official culture dead, boring, and every creative individual was looking for something new, something that would be fresh, and something that would be different. But lots of the so-called second culture, because the second culture, the underground arts, that it had developed, had evolved throughout the 70s and was very mature already by then. Most of it, however, was as serious in its political, ideological, and aesthetic opposition to the official culture. And it was anti-Soviet, anti-communist, it was pro-Western, but it was dead serious. Kuryokhin did not want to accept it. And the postmodern attitudes had already started to evolve in a very embryonic shape, probably even more in Moscow than they were in Leningrad. Poet Dmitry Alexandrovich Prigov, the whole movement of Moscow conceptualism, source art, the artistic movement that was based on the one hand on the achievements or on the ideas of Andy Warhol's pop art, but which was using the icons of Soviet Union, hammers and sickles, red stars, Lenin mausoleum. Those were the same, they were used in the same way as Andy Warhol used Mickey Mouse or Marilyn Monroe or Campbell soup cans. So they became the items and the artifacts of this new approach. But it was in Moscow, now we know it. And although these processes evolved pretty much simultaneously, there was not a lot of collaboration, there was hardly any knowledge. Unless you lived in Moscow, you wouldn't know what was happening there. In the same way, unless you lived in Leningrad, you had no idea. You could much easier find out what was happening in New York, in Paris, or in London than to find out what was happening in another Soviet city. So there was this complete isolation. But Kuryokhin, he was trying to work out this new approach, this new way to handle his own art and to handle, to present it to audiences. And I remember there was a very interesting, I remember how shocked I was when he told me once in our private conversation. he said, who cares now if Vladimir Mayakovsky, Andrei Kuryokhin, Andy Warhol, or John Cage were genuine innovators or opportunist charlatans. They made their names, they left their names in the art history. This is what is most important. And he was looking for these very, very radical ways. So this slapstick to public taste, which was of course the slogan of futurists proclaimed by the same Kuryokhin and Mayakovsky in their Futurist Manifesto in 1915, that was the slogan for him. That was the way to approach his art. But he had to find forms. He had to find what would actually constitute his performances. And there he was helped a lot by another musician of free jazz, Vladimir Chekasin, who was a member of the foremost and most important avant-garde jazz ensemble in the Soviet Union, the Ganelin Trio. They lived and worked in Vilnius, in Lithuania, which was then, of course, part of the Soviet Union, and where everything was kind of looser. But they were working in this kind of, again, avant-garde, free jazz idiom. But Chekasin was started working with this very ironic, and he was bringing waltzes and marches and polkas into his performances. So that was already ruining this kind of stern, serious approach to contemporary music, to contemporary compositions. And Kuryokhin was always playing along with Chekasin, and that's where the roots of his future popular mechanics were. And at our contemporary music club, which, as I said, we formed in 1979 and which existed until 1982, when it was banned by the authorities, that was the playground to evolve his future ideas, which flourished in later popular mechanics. And so he was bringing all the different elements, and these elements would be completely diverse and completely antagonistic. We do not see a lot here, but I mean, there could be a full-blown symphony orchestra, there could be a full-blown choir, there could be a folk group, there could be animals, there could be circus performers, there could be poetry readings, there could be popular pop artists, pop singers, who would be introduced into popular mechanics performances. And again, this is where the definition of skill, which Alexei Yurchak came up with and which Andrei quoted just a few minutes ago, where you could not even understand or differentiate whether it was mockery or whether he treated those artists with mockery or with reverence. Like, for instance, there was this hugely popular Soviet singer, Eduard Hill, I don't know, a Cliff Richard of the Soviet Union. Don't ask me how, but Kuryokhin managed to talk Eduard Hill to take part in his performance. And again, there would be no ordinary way for a performer to come out on stage. Eduard Hill was brought out on stage, carried out actually physically by the members of Kuryokhin's, like all the characters like here. He would be carried out on stage, wrapped in foil. so that you do not see a face, you do not see a human figure, you don't know. You just see that there's this kind of human shape being brought out on stage. Then this foil is unwrapped and he's singing his sort of most popular Soviet tune. And you don't know what to think of it. Is this a reverential attitude to this guy, or is he being made fun of? But it was an incredible fun. But this fun was carried on not only to stage performances, but to pretty much every aspect of life. That's how he would be talking to people. That's how he would be giving interviews to Western journalists who, well, initially those would be only Western journalists. Of course, the Soviet official media completely ignored the entire second culture, the entire artistic underground. So I remember a French journalist came and interviewed Kuryokhin and Africa. Africa was his sidekick. Well, a very important artist in his own right, who's still alive. And I was interpreting this interview. And the way those two were answering serious questions, that would be, again, that would be challenge, that would be mockery, that would be teasing the journalist. And you could hardly ever expect a serious answer. But those answers, they would never be, or whatever he would say, it would never be an answer of a comedian in the way that we are used to. It would be always so subtle that you could never ever see, I mean, you could see that, but he was playing with all these things all the time. He would be switching from seriousness to this kind of very subtle irony. He then would precede his stage performances, whether they would be solo piano concerts or huge popular mechanics, with verbal introductions. And these verbal introductions would go on for, like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes. There would be complete improvisations, and again, he would be talking about improvisation, he would be talking about feelings and love, and then suddenly he would proceed to comparisons between improvisation and masturbation. And what you achieve in improvisation, this climatic catharsis, is pretty much the same as what you achieve in masturbation when you achieve orgasm. And he's dead serious when he's saying all these things to you. And of course, I haven't been watching the clock. How am I doing? Should wrap up. Of course, probably the most famous and the climatic exponent of this approach was his famous TV program called Lenin Mushroom. It happened in 1991, in May 1991, when for 2 hours, Sergey Kuryokhin and the host of a TV show, Sergey Kuryokhin, with most serious faces, bringing in scientists, documentary footage, diagrams, were proving that Vladimir Ilyich Lenin was indeed a mushroom. It is funny, but again, we should bear in mind that it was not so much a mockery of Vladimir Lenin as the icon of communism. This is 1991. This is like a few years after glasnost and perestroika, where all these icons and ideas had already been disillusioned and disclosed enough. They were not worthy targets for Kuryokhin's wit and for his sarcasm. His target was this whole bacchanalia, if I could use the word, of disclosures and revelations that everybody was talking about how horrible communism was and how horrible communist ideas were. And here he was mocking not so much Lenin, but he was mocking this whole campaign that became prevalent. Pretty much the same was with his political aspiration and political campaigning in support of National Bolshevik Party in the mid-90s, when his target was the newly grown Russian bourgeoisie with its bourgeois tastes and bourgeois aspirations, and he was siding with most radical. But this is a very separate issue, and I'm sure Andrei will tell you more about this, and maybe if we have a discussion, I'll be happy to join in. Well, I don't know, as Hannelore rightly said, I could go on for hours, but